Hi, this is Rob Madison, President of GRAPA. I just wanted to let you know how excited I am to be given this opportunity to tell you a little bit about our new Advanced Roaming Operations and Assurance Workshop. The new Advanced Roaming Operations and Assurance Workshop is a 3-day program that GRAPA put together based upon working with our membership from around the world. The intention is to provide roaming operations managers with a comprehensive guide to how to run a profitable, risk-contained roaming business. The program has been put together with several specific kinds of people in mind. First of all, certainly for the roaming manager or the person who wants to understand or learn how to do a better job of managing the roaming line of business. Clearly, members of the roaming team, including the network people, the IT people, the operations and billing people, and the marketing people involved with roaming would also benefit greatly. In addition to that, we have a big focus on the financial aspects, the revenue assurance aspects, fraud and security, and of course, internal auditors and external auditors will get a lot of benefit as well. This workshop has been put together based upon benchmarks that we've done working with our over 5,000 registered GRAPA members. GRAPA members are revenue assurance professionals, fraud professionals, and audit professionals working only in telecoms all over the world. And we have trained and certified over 1,000 professionals from many different carriers that do roaming, as well as digital clearinghouses, regulators, auditors, and other professionals that are focused on the roaming line of business. GRAPA has developed these workshops to incorporate best practices from all of these areas, and we pride ourselves on the fact that our training is practical in nature. You will get some theory, but only that theory that's critical to your being able to do a better job of assuring the things that make the roaming business work. The big question that people ask is, why do I need to take a class in roaming? Why is understanding roaming at this level of detail important? Well, there's many answers to that question. The first answer is roaming is a highly profitable line of business. There's a lot of money that can be made doing roaming, and so it warrants special attention. The other reason is equally powerful, and that is, although roaming is profitable, it carries a lot of high-risk aspects, and if you don't understand those risks, you can give away a lot of that profit. Third of all, roaming is very complicated. The business model for roaming involves a lot of different parties, and it can be very difficult to make sure that all the ends are coming together. Not only is it complicated from a business perspective, it's also very complicated technology. It's very easy to get involved in frauds, to get involved in leakages, if you do not understand how these things all fit together. In addition to this, the fact of the matter is that anyone looking at the future of telecoms knows that roaming relationships are the future of our business. The LTE technology, UMTS, and IMS technologies all have huge components built in to allow plug-and-play roaming for all of the different products and services that we support. The voice roaming and the text messaging roaming that we do today is nothing more than a little drop in the bucket of the massive roaming revenues that we're going to be looking at in our next generation of telecommunications. And for this reason, as much as any other, it's important for telecoms professionals to understand what it takes to make roaming operations work. Our course is divided into 6 4-hour units, each unit focusing on another aspect of the roaming business model and the roaming assurance and security area so important. We'll take a look at each of these modules, each of these units in detail to give you a better idea of what's involved. Unit 1 is the introduction to roaming. This is where we provide the student with a clear overall view of the roaming business model. Most people in telecommunications, believe it or not, don't even really understand what roaming is. They don't understand how the roaming business model works. So we spend some time to give you the history and the layout of exactly what roaming is, how it works, and why it's such an important part of the telecommunications business. In addition to that, it's very important that you understand the entire roaming lifecycle, not just one part of it. You need to understand the different parties involved, the different processes that make it work, and most critically, the different economic exchanges. Who pays who, who's liable for what, and what are my exposures to revenue loss based upon the way those economic exchanges work. And then finally, learn the GRAPA industry standard methodology for how to apply controls to the roaming environment. The roaming environment is like a many-headed monster, and if you don't have all of the right controls in place, any one control area missing can cause you to lose all of the revenues that you've worked so hard to earn. What we strive to do is to help you to learn how to make your roaming environment safe, secure, and profitable. And in the first unit, we'll give you the guidelines and the framework for how GRAPA helps you to do that. Unit 2, we will review the architecture for the roaming environment, and we'll review the basic concepts and principles and methods of roaming fraud and how to manage them. If you're going to understand this model and how it works, you're going to have to understand what the different hardware is, the software, the systems and the operations, and the different partners, how they fit together, and how we get control over them. So the roaming architecture that we cover in Unit 2 gives you a good established baseline for putting together a model in your own head so that you can understand how all the pieces fit together. We'll show you how they work together, and then once you understand that, we'll be able to use that as a foundation for explaining what the unique fraud risks are that the roaming business model represents. It is estimated that telecoms lose billions and billions of dollars to roaming frauds each year. And to tell you the truth, we've talked to many people in these situations. Most of those losses are preventable if the people running their roaming business had simply understood where the risks were and put some very simple controls in place. We'll talk about the major categories of roaming frauds, and we'll talk about the most important system to the roaming fraud professional, the roaming fraud management system. We'll talk about the fraud management systems, how they work, and why they're such a critical part of roaming fraud containment. Unit 3 will cover roaming operations and signaling. We have covered the basic architecture in Unit 2, but now we're going to talk about a lower level of detail. We're going to talk about the systems and the processes and the different parties involved, specifically in the billing and the settlement of roaming amounts in between carriers. So understanding how the billing systems work, and most critical, understanding the signaling system, SS7. Roaming cannot happen without SS7. The role of the signaling partner, the role of SS7 cannot be emphasized enough. If you don't understand how SS7 signaling works, then you can't understand what your liabilities are, and you can't understand the kind of controls that you're going to need to put in place. So during Unit 3, we will review network operations and specifically the SS7 signaling. We'll talk about all the different ways that SS7 signaling supplies and makes roaming possible, and all of the different risks that it hopefully prevents against if it's done properly. We'll talk about how billing is managed and how the signaling assurance, authentication, and authorization turns into call detail records or prepaid billing amounts that we can then process, manage, and invoice for. After we've reviewed the signaling, the network, and the billing, we'll take a look at the major risks, and we'll review the GRAPA standard controls for how to put controls around that to keep it contained. And before you get too frightened by this, understand this unit will definitely be a technology for dummies. We'll give you everything you need to know to assure the roaming environment, but we won't turn you into a technology geek. There are certain key concepts you need to understand. We've made that very easy for you to understand and work with. Unit 4, we'll now take a look at the exchanges. We'll look at the roaming partners, the relationships with them, and the very special partners called digital clearinghouses. We'll look at the industry standard controls for tracking all of the roaming transactions. We'll talk about putting controls on mediations. We'll talk about tap files and how to get controls over the way you manage tap files. We'll even talk about what tap files are, and then we'll talk about the DCH, the digital clearinghouse. We'll talk about the concept of data clearing and the concepts of financial clearing, what they mean and how to do them, and how to protect yourself against losses and frauds in those areas. We'll then spend some time talking about tap files and wrap files, the key exchange unit. Tap files and wrap files are XML invoices, basically, that you pass between roaming carriers. It's the way we exchange money and settle. So understanding what they are, how they work, and how to put controls over them is critical. In Unit 5, we'll talk about the billing for roaming, the different processes involved in putting roaming onto the customer's invoice or tracking it in the prepaid billing system, and we'll talk about one of the most critical aspects of roaming risk, and that is credit management. Roaming is a credit agreement more than anything else. There are two styles of credit agreement between roaming partners, the HUR, which is High Usage Report, and the NRTDE, the Near Real-Time Data Clearing Standards. So understanding how these two work against the backdrop of the overall roaming architecture, and then understanding how to manage and control traffic, how to master traffic assurance and making sure that you're getting all of the revenues that you've earned, understanding traffic, how to do traffic analysis, how to compare traffic analysis to your credit exposure. We'll then talk about how to get controls over prepaid and postpaid rates and rating. And finally, in Unit 6, Camel roaming and roaming profit protection, we'll look at the most commonly applied form of roaming and the kind that will soon dominate all over the world, and that is camel roaming. So we'll take a look at the camel roaming relationships, that is prepaid roaming between partners. We'll see how the revenue flows change when you get into the prepaid mode and the kinds of controls we need to put in place over those. In addition to that, we're going to teach you how to do what we call margin reporting and market controls. How do I get controls over the profitability of my roaming business? How do I put controls in place? Also, what are the different esoteric profit maximization strategies, steering, guiding, and different techniques that partners use to try to squeeze extra profits out of their relationships? We'll also talk about the marketing aspects of roaming, the different segmentations of roaming customers, the different churn, profitability, and directionality issues that drive how marketing people make better roaming decisions. This is a very exciting, comprehensive program, a very power-packed 3 days, or specifically a 24 hours. Be sure to register for the class. GRAPA training in roaming is available in our regularly scheduled venue events 3 times a year in Cape Town, South Africa, Dubai in the Arab Emirates, along with Orlando, Chicago, and other locations around the world. In addition to these public venues, we also provide the roaming training for individual organizations and customized on-site training opportunities. So feel free to contact your GRAPA representatives or check out our website at www.grapatel.com.